Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. Today is the final episode of my France and French wine mini-series. That's not to say we're never going to talk about French wine again. Don't worry, it's definitely going to come up. I even have some fun interviews planned out. They're just not going to be all bunched together. We're gonna talk about some other stuff. So if you're like sick of French stuff, you're going to be very excited for what's to come next. But we have to finish the interview that we did with my Burgundy tour guide, Kim. Now, if you haven't heard part 1 of this interview, I highly recommend pause this episode. You can always come back to it. All right, I'm not going to waste your time. Let's just jump into that interview. All right. Well, talking about Burgundy, this is kind of a big question, so I want you to take it however you want to go. But the world of Burgundy is really confusing for a lot of people who are just getting into wine. So what would you say is most important to know about the region?
I would say foremost that it is the birthplace of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And it's why so many people come to Beaune to come to the Mecca of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, that they should know that it's not, if they're drinking wines from Sonoma County, California, the wines are going to be very different from what they're accustomed to here. Many people are very thankful for that. And other people, their palates might need to get accustomed to them. But this is what I'll subjectively say is the authentic version of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So the main thing to know is, yes, this is where those grapes started and where their wine has been made for over 2,000 years. But beyond that simple fact that Burgundy is incredibly complex because every single parcel of vines makes a different style of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So you can come learn the basics of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but then, and especially with one day like you got to experience, you learn the complexity and that there are so many nuances of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and of Burgundy that you might get hooked and want to keep studying it for a lifetime.
Yes, absolutely. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. One of the questions that always comes up in my mind, and I've slowly learned this, but I feel like for others too, is the question of how does each parcel make different styles of wine? And one question that I think we talk about a lot in Burgundy and other regions is the soil and how does that soil. And I'm curious, you've spent so much time in Burgundy and talked to so many winemakers and learned a lot. How would you say the different soils or other things affect the wine that's made in Burgundy?
Soil is definitely a big part of it, but it's an important part of the concept of terroir. Terroir is going to affect wine around the world. Here in Burgundy, where the grape is grown, makes such different style wines because the key element of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir is that they're very thin skin. So they reflect where they're being grown more than any other grapes in the world. So that's the key elemental difference between other varietals of wine, other regions, because the terroir, which if this is a good time, I can describe very as succinctly as I can the aspects of terroir. But thanks to this, we have this huge mosaic of different personalities of vineyards. So we became a World Heritage Site for UNESCO since 2015, which of course also attracts a lot of people to come and discover why this is so. But terroir starts even before the soil. It's the bedrock here, which is limestone, but there's even different types of limestone. None of the vineyards in France, if they have an AOC, an official appellation, can be irrigated. So the roots going very deep in the soil and that bedrock are going to take the characteristics from it. So you have limestone is the bedrock here in Burgundy, but there's different types of limestone that are going to change the character of the wine. Then there's the soil, how much soil, what the components in the soil are, what other mix of elements are in the soil, how rocky it is or how clayey it is going to affect the style of the grapes and therefore the wine. So where it is on the slope, at the bottom of the slope, a lot of topsoil, much easier to grow. The very top of the slope, much more of a struggle, makes a very different style wine. The orientation towards the sun makes a huge difference. Facing to the east as opposed to the south or the north makes a very different style wine. Just think about roses and tomatoes as opposed to camellias and fuchsias in a garden. In a garden, we plant certain plants that prefer sun or cool. Here, grapes change because of that orientation. Okay. The topography changes it so much because the topography is going to change the microclimate. Is cold air coming in and affecting, making it cooler? Is it protected by a hillside so it stays much warmer? All of those aspects change the character. So it's Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but how many tens of thousands of versions of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir to the extent that one parcel of vines next to another, all of which have their own name, their own personality, just like all of us do. If you taste them side by side, same vintage, same producer, because two other very important elements that change the character of the wine, you're going to see there's a difference. And you don't have to be knowledgeable about wine. You don't have to understand anything. You're going to notice a difference. Your palate will see the difference of those two wines. It can be subtle, but it's definitely there. That's the fascination. So the simple thing, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, terroir, and then many other aspects that make it a little complicated here.
Yes, absolutely. I think that Burgundy is definitely that one where it's like the first step, totally straightforward. It's like, these are the grapes. There's like the primary grapes. And then there's like the, the two others that you'll find occasionally, but it's like, that's it for grapes. You're like, great. Okay. Tell me the next thing. And then it's like, okay, all of this. It's like they're all little parcels that are different. And then there's this and then there's this. And it's like, oh, wait. Can we go back to step one? Like, just worry about the grapes, please.
But that's the great thing about spending a day like we did together, that you get that information, but then it's reiterated and reiterated each tasting. And I think most people end up coming home and tasting the wines they purchase, but also getting very curious, getting to wine tastings. The only way to learn, like we talked about at the beginning, is through experience. So you've got to taste a lot and keep asking questions while you're tasting to really get to understand that and see the nuances.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Okay. The other question I was going to ask on like learning kind of about Burgundy, what are your tips for somebody when reading the label on a bottle of Burgundy wine? And then to follow up with that, how can we tell if it's a good bottle of Burgundy or not? I know you're like, that's an impossible question. We'll go back to the first one.
I'd become rich and famous if I could come up with that.
I will go back to this first part. Yeah. How tips for reading.
Yes, that one I can cover. So in Europe and the old world in general, it's not always the case, but for the most part, we have the appellation on the label where the grapes are grown and not the grape varietal, which makes it really tough for people from the New World. United States, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, etc., predominantly has the grape varietal on the label. Here it's where the grapes are grown, and it's only at the entry level that you might have Chardonnay or Pinot Noir or the other white grape we have here, Aligoté, on the label. It might be on the back label, but quite often is not. So Europeans in general, if they're drinking wine, they have a sense of what that appellation in general is, the character of it. But for not knowing the appellations, it's hard to even know, is it Chardonnay or Pinot Noir? If it's red, you could assume it's Pinot Noir. If it's white, you could assume it's Chardonnay. Not always going to be the case. But because of this aspect of terroir, each of the appellations is so different that you just, again, it's an intense educational program to get to know all these appellations, to know which appellation. If you're looking for a lovely white Burgundy, do you want to start with the three greatest, Pouligny, Montrachet, Chassagne, Montrachet, or Meursault? Of course, they're the most well-known, the most expensive. Do you want something that's a much better value, something like Saint-Romain, Auxerre, appellations that are not nearly as well-known, but they're each going to have a different character. So the only thing you can really learn about the labels is where it's from. And then you have to know that on the label, so if it says Bourgogne, you know the grapes are from Burgundy, but Burgundy is a pretty large place. It's 250 kilometers from north to south. There's different wine areas within Burgundy. So you have to know which wine area, because so you have either the regional Bourgogne or you have the name of the wine village. So the village has the name, of course, and the vineyards around it have the name. So if you get a Meursault, all the grapes are coming from that area with a distinct border on a map around it of Meursault. But then you could have Meursault Premier Cru, and which is the potential of the land to make a better wine. But it's the potential. And centuries ago, the monks, who were the main people working the land, realized that that vineyard that eventually became known now as Premier Cru made better wines than the surrounding vineyards. But it's not a guarantee it's going to be better. Remember, Burgundy's complex.
Oh, yes.
And then some of the villages like Chassagne and Pouligny-Montrachet have Grand Cru, the greatest potential of the vineyards. But most vineyards are owned by multiple wineries. Each winery, like each chef, makes a different meal from the same basket of ingredients. Winemakers getting the same grapes from the same vineyard make two different versions of that terroir, of that personality.
Yeah.
So to have those different expressions, you have a general sense of what Meursault, Pouligny, or Chassagne are like, but then you have the 4 different levels in some of the villages. And then you need to know what was the vintage like. Since we don't irrigate, every vintage is different. And which winemaker do you like? Well, the only way you get to know that is coming to Burgundy or drinking a lot of Burgundy wines at home. So there's a lot of work ahead of us.
I mean, but it sounds like great work, doesn't
It
it?
is
I mean,
great
if
work.
really they're like, okay, here's the work you need to do. You need to taste a lot of different wines. And it's like, oh,
Right.
really? That's what I have to do? But it sounds like paying attention to, like, it does matter in Burgundy, like all of those different pieces on the label of, like, when you are tasting wine, like I always tell people, like, either take a picture of the label, make a note in your phone, have a little, I have a wine journal where I like to write down all those things, because then you can start noticing which regions stand out to you. Because, like, there is like a typicity of, like, that region generally makes this style. So you can
Exactly.
kind of trust that.
The general
Yeah.
character, the typicity is the perfect term for it. Yeah.
Exactly. And then pay attention to the producer, because maybe you just like that style that winemaker does. And you're like, I'm good with wherever it's from, as long as they're making it. I know it's going to be I know it's going to be
Exactly.
good.
Just to complicate things a bit, and with all of that, we're definitely talking about Burgundy, because other wine regions like Bordeaux, the main name on the label is the winery, the chateau where it's being made. Whereas here, the main name, the main word, and the largest word on the label is where it's grown, not the winery, but where the vineyard is located. So, leading to your other question, how do you know if it's a good wine? It's impossible. You get more and more educated guesses. So you realize you like Burgundy. Okay, which area of Burgundy? Do you like Chablis in the north? Do you like the Côte d'Or, where the most expensive and most renowned wines come from? Do you like the Mâconnais further south, where the famous wines of Puy-Foussay, Mâcon Village come from? Or have you discovered the Côte Chalonnaise, which I hope more and more people will, the least well-known, but very affordable wines, beautiful wines, great area to discover. And so you need to know which is the area you like, and then, yes, what were the vintages like? So the only recommendation for knowing if it's good or not is finding, just like you would if you love films, you follow a film critic that you know you've liked the films they've highly recommended. Do not follow the great or the very large publications. I'm not going to say any names, but if it's 100-point wine, I don't generally like them. So you need to find somebody, your wine merchant, your local wine merchant, who hosts tastings. You taste some wines, you tell them, I love this wine, help me find more like it. They're going to be more knowledgeable than most consumers, so they can help you start finding wines that you like. It's the only way to know, because it can be Grand Cru, one of the top levels. It can be really expensive, and it may not be very good, and you've wasted your investment.
Yeah, I think the only thing guaranteed at Grand Cru is, like, it's guaranteed to be more expensive. That's your guarantee.
Definitely more expensive. But it could be a vintage that was very challenging, and it could be a winemaker who's not on top of his game. And so you've spent a lot of money, but it's not at all the style of wine that you like, or it may not be ready to drink, or there might be an issue that happened in the bottle. So it's a lot of educating yourselves.
Yeah. And I like your tip too. I want to highlight again that you called out work with your local wine merchant. Like if you can find a local wine shop, that's one of my favorite things to do. And because they literally can be your wine buyer. Like if they learn your taste, you learn what they buy a lot of, they can help you find additional wines. Cause then it can be as simple as, yeah, I bought this Pommard from you, and absolutely loved it, the 2015 or whatnot. And what else should I try that is
Right.
similar to that? And they can help
Exactly.
point you. You don't have to do all that work of figuring out, okay, what else would be like that? They'll do it for you because that's and
Yeah.
they love it. They love it. That's why they do that.
It's their purpose in life. Exactly.
Exactly. No, I love it. Okay. Now going back, I'm going to go back to the tours a little bit just because it was
Okay.
fun talking about those. How do you, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but how do you select the wineries that you include on your tours? Is there certain criteria that you look for? This podcast is sponsored by VoChill. When you're enjoying a glass of wine, temperature matters. And you don't need to be a wine expert to know this. You know this the minute you realize you forgot to put the bottle of wine in the fridge, and now you're stuck with lukewarm Sauvignon Blanc that is the opposite of refreshing. You know adding ice cubes will just water the wine down, but it seems like it's your only option. Not anymore. I want to introduce you to one of my favorite wine gadgets, VoChill. This gadget is as simple as it is elegant. It will keep wine perfectly chilled in your own wine glass. No more clunky metal or plastic tumblers or ice in your wine. While this gadget is an absolute must during the summer months, I don't enjoy wine without it from June to September. It's also incredibly useful for those days when you're craving a glass of white or rosé, but you don't want to wait for the bottle to chill in the fridge. VoChill offers a stemmed and stemless chiller in multiple colors, so you're bound to find one that's perfect for you. They also make the perfect gift. I should know, I got one for my mom at Christmas a couple years ago, and she loves it. Head to vochill.com, that's VOCHILL.com, to get your perfect wine chiller, and don't forget to use code CORKANDFIZZ for 15% off your order. This podcast is sponsored by the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club. Interested in trying new wines, but not sure where to start? Or maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you love the idea of tasting wine live with me. If that's you, come join my Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club, and you'll get to sip wine with me twice a month while I help you find new favorite wines. The Cork Crew is not your ordinary wine club. This is a community of people who are passionate about exploring new flavors, learning about different wine styles, and having fun along the way. And the best part about this club, purchasing the wine is completely optional. Plus, all events are recorded, and you have access to the full library of recordings as a Cork Crew member, so you can always catch up if you can't make it live. Oh, and did I mention it's virtual, which means you get to do all of this from the comfort of your sofa in your PJs. No need to worry about driving in crappy traffic, finding a designated driver, or spending an arm and a leg on a taxi. Want to give it a try without the commitment? You're in luck. Right now, I'm offering a free class pass to anybody who wants to try out the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Tasting Club. With this pass, you'll be able to join a Cork Crew event of your choosing. No strings attached. I don't need your credit card. I don't need you to sign up for anything. You'll be my guest. Simply head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your class pass and be one step closer to becoming a member of the best wine tasting club around, the Cork Crew. I can't wait to see you there. Now let's get back to the show.
Yes, most definitely. One, that they accept visits.
That's very important
criteria. But there's a lot of wineries that accept visits that I will not take people to. So the quality most definitely has to be there. But I'm going to get excited about a style of wines, and there's going to be an array of style of wines that I like. But I'm going to have a tough time taking you to wineries where I don't like their wines. I've been in wine sales since 2000. So 24 years of promoting wines to people. you can only promote something I feel that you really love and are inspired by. So definitely have good wine, definitely have, are open to having visits and have wine to sell. There's a few wineries, but I used to have at least 5 to 8 great wineries that would still allow us to come in, even if they didn't have wine to sell, for a few select people, you know, people that are more knowledgeable about wine, someone like Haley, that they're open to having a few people come in and taste, even those since COVID and since the last decade with tiny crops because of the severe weather conditions. They can't take their time to accept those visits anymore. So it's wineries that definitely accept visits, that have good quality wine, that are still selling wine. But I would love to say it's because of the ambiance. But as you experience, there's completely different ambiance in every winery we went to. So it's not even about the ambiance. They're all authentic in their own right. So it's not like going to Napa and you want to go where they have the most beautiful picnic setting or the most beautiful tasting room. It's really about the person. And yes, if there's someone really grumpy, unless he makes extraordinary wine, I want people to go where the winemaker, the person giving us the visit, is excited to be there and happy to be showing you the wine. So their personality counts, the setting, no. So those are the main criteria. But there are fewer and fewer. It's getting really tricky to find wineries that even accept visits. Luckily, every year I come across 2 or 3 new ones, so I'm able to renew the selection I can choose from. But then you have things like summer vacation, harvest, weddings, other things that they're doing, and they have their own lives, and certainly making the wine, but their own lives are much more important than opening their doors to you. So it can be tricky, to
Yeah.
say the least, like you experienced in the Muscadet region.
Yes, yeah, exactly. No, and I'm very grateful. The one thing that my husband and I were talking about, it was just like, yeah, the wines that we had on your tour were phenomenal. Like if there was one thing that like stayed true through all of it was just like those wines stood out. And like you said, it was like totally different wineries, different, scenarios. Like one, we sat down at this beautiful table down in the cellar and like, it was very like it had that little more formal tie to it. And one of it was like, yeah, it was just like it was a big table. We still sat down, but it was kind of this like just big space that they had. And the other one was like literally come into the barrel room, standing the whole time, and we'll pour you some amazing freaking wines. But it was all, yeah, all the wine was like, and I appreciate that. I know that was a criteria for you that it was going to be like phenomenal standout wine. All
The
right.
most important element.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, that's why you go to Burgundy, right?
Right.
So, as I think you've kind of mentioned a few tips already, but I'm just going to try to pull it all together in one part. As a tourism expert in Burgundy, what are your 3 top tips for people who are looking to visit Burgundy?
I would say almost the top tip, and not into the logistics, but come open-minded and be ready to experience a lot and just, yeah, be ready to discover. Time of the year definitely has a significant aspect when you're coming. August is really tough because it's the only time that winemakers can take off on vacation before the harvest. So August can be very tricky. And as most people know, July and August are much more crowded in Europe. They can be extremely hot. This year, July was pouring down rain. So people are always asking me, what's the best season weather-wise? If you could tell me that for the planet at this point, you are amazing, because even the meteorologists can't get it right anymore. Well, did they ever? But it's getting more and more challenging. So weather-wise is very tricky. But of course, the huge European vacation time is July and August. So not ideal. In August, so many of the wineries shut down for 2 to 3 weeks because they need a break before harvest starts. So time of the year is important. Obviously, if you come in the middle of winter, it can be fun to be in the cellars. You're a little bit warmer actually going into the cellar. But I would say May, June can be an ideal time. September and October can be very tricky. We never know when the harvest is going to happen. It can start as early as some recent years, the middle of August, other years, late September. But it is much trickier, as you discovered, to get into wineries during the harvest. So most people are planning a trip to Europe 3 to 6 months in advance. So September and October can be fun, beautiful colors, watching the picking teams, but much more challenging to get into wineries. And then where to stay, just like you brought up earlier. Dijon is beautiful. It's the capital, the official capital of Burgundy. Beautiful architecture, lots of history. But removed from the wine world, it's not that far, but Beaune is really in the heart. So I would say stay in or near Beaune. The great thing about staying in Beaune or outside of the rampart walls, but in the actual town of Beaune, is that you can walk to restaurants in the evening. So you can walk home after enjoying a lot of great Burgundy wine with your dinner. And you're just much more independent, being able to see everything. There's so much besides wine to visit in Beaune that my recommendation is always to stay in Beaune or
Okay.
very nearby it.
Yeah. I love it. No, great. That was going to be one of my questions was going to be like, when's the best time to visit? Because I had such a hard time trying to figure out when I wanted to go. And, it's some places recommend harvest time because it's such a fun time to be there. And it is really cool, but it does add that challenge of like, it's not the same as here in the US where like the winemaking team is busy with harvest, but they have somebody there for tours or like you can get involved in the harvest. They like have these fun events and you can see how then it's
Right.
like in France, it's like, no, that's not really a thing. Like you're just in the
Working and we
way.
don't want you around.
Please go away.
Exactly.
But it
So
was
we can do
beautiful.
some tours during harvest, but just know that it's a more limited selection
Yeah.
of wineries.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Before we get to, I always end with a little speed round. It's just kind of fun to ask these questions. And I call it a speed round mostly like, don't think too hard on it. Otherwise, we'll like be here forever.
You're
But
right.
I just wanted to give you a chance to highlight, is there anything new coming up for you? Or are we sticking to the amazing tours that you do? And that's really, I mean, I think you're amazing at it. So, but I always love to ask.
Yes. And I put a little plug in for it earlier. I moved last year to the wine region of the Côte Chalonnaise, the hillsides around the town of Chalon-sur-Saône. So it's a beautiful wine region. I'd say the landscape is even more beautiful than the Côte d'Or. And culturally, it's much richer as far as the exquisite churches and ruined chateaux and other chateaus that are still being lived in, some of which can be visited, the culinary opportunities here. So my next project is to develop tours here in the Côte Chalonnaise, but that would include as well, besides wine, and they'd all be personalized, is to include opportunities to be biking, to be hiking, to visit other cultural sites, to visit the local goat cheese maker. So other aspects that Burgundy offers, and wine that's more affordable and there's more quantity of it. So it's a great opportunity to introduce people to a new part of Burgundy.
Oh, I love it. And now you've already got me planning my next trip back to back to
We'd have
Burgundy.
fun, Haley. That would be great.
No, that sounds lovely. Super fun. And I love the idea of like how cool is it to like get to go to a region that's not as well known, like a region that like not as many people would hear of and like imagine everything you get to see. And I feel like those regions are, yeah, they are something special to go somewhere that isn't as like well known or as visited or whatnot.
As developed for tourism, because Beaune, as beautiful it is, has changed so dramatically in 34 years and based on high-end tourism, because that's what can be developed there.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful and definitely worth visiting. But the Côte Chalonnaise you have, again, I use the word quite often, but it matters a lot to me. It's very authentic here. So you really see what Beaune and the Côte d'Or would have been like 50, 80 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, cool.
new
Okay.
things to look.
Very fun. Okay. And if people are interested in that, I mentioned it in the outro as well, but if you want to get in contact with Kim, the best way to do that, send her an email. I will include that email in the show notes. It's kim@journeysinwine.com, whether you want to book a tour in Beaune or in this new place as she's developing that, depending on how far out your trip is, I'm guessing.
Yes.
That would be the best way to get in contact with her. And like I said, it will be in the show notes. Okay, so like I said, I always end with this little speed round. Just don't think too hard on it. It's kind of like first thing that comes to mind, just kind of fun. So your favorite wine at the moment, and this can be from Burgundy, from anywhere, just your favorite wine at the moment.
I'm loving Beaujolais Cru, the lovely wines of Beaujolais, because my lifestyle right now is suited to it. They're very affordable. They're very easy to drink young. They're absolutely lovely. They're super versatile. So I love Beaujolais cru wines. If you think Morgon, Vieille, Morgon is the town, but Morgon, Moulin à Vent, Saint-Amour, Julianas, some beautiful wines, of course, of the Gamay grape. So it's a region I love as well.
Yes. Oh, I remember. I'm so glad you brought that up because we on our way to Beaune stopped in Beaujolais and
Right.
yes, and so we got to do a tasting there, which was really special. It was actually with the winemaker. I don't know how we managed this, but it was very special. And yeah, the wines were so good. We ended up buying a case from there, and we weren't planning on it at all.
Perfect.
But
Yes.
yeah,
It's another great area to discover. Beautiful for tourism as well.
yeah. Okay, how about favorite wine region that you visited?
It was actually in Brazil,
Ooh.
near Porto Alegre in the southern part of Brazil, and Italians had gone there. They weren't fabulous wines, but it was just such a beautiful area and something totally unexpected for me. But there's so many areas I love. I love going to Italy. I'd say the Piemonte, the Piedmont area of northern Italy. I felt very much at home because it's very similar in some ways to Burgundy, and the notion of terroir is so important there. An old Barolo can taste like great old Burgundy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but, get me started and, it's hard to say one favorite area.
Right. You're like, I'll just keep going. I'll keep naming things. Okay. Maybe it's on the harder side, but maybe not. How about a wine region you'd like to visit that you haven't yet?
Austria.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to go through Austria just for the landscape already. But when I was a sales rep in the Bay Area, which I ended up becoming at one point, I was selling some Austrian wines and beautiful dry Austrian Riesling, the Gruners, and realizing there's very high-end Gruner Veltliner. And the photos that I saw, that's where I want to go.
Oh, great one. Okay. How about favorite like wine and food pairing? What's like a go-to or a special treat, food and wine pairing that you like?
So I can't say Mexican food and beer.
That's such a wine person thing to say.
It comes up, I bring it up almost every tour because it's such a perfect match. If you have a beautiful, well-aged Côte de Nuit, so the northern part of the Côte d'Or, Pinot Noir with grilled duck breast, there's just nothing like it. It's just such a perfect match. The richness of the duck, the meatiness of it, say with a great Chambol Musigny, it's just the perfect match.
Okay, I love it. All right. And then the last one, what is a wine that has surprised you lately?
I was in Sicily this summer, and I had actually been selling the wines from Sicily from the Mount Etna region. It's called Nerello Mascalese. Make beautiful. But I actually did a wine tasting in Sicily, and I discovered Pericone. And I smelled it and I thought, because I'm not a fan of big, dark wines, and I smelled it and I thought, I tasted it and it was fascinating, to the extent that I'm hoping to export the wines from this winery that I discovered during the tasting. So it's a beautiful wine that's got some heft to it, that I'd never heard of before. So for me to learn about new wines is definitely exciting. In Italy, there are so many varietals. It's easy to do so. But yes, my best.
Very cool. And in Pericone, that's the name of the grape?
Of the grape. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I'm like, I've never heard of that either.
No, most people would not have, but it's really good. And maybe it will come to the States one day with Sélection Gagne on
all right.
label.
I'll keep an eye out for it. Yes. Sounds great. All right. Well, that is all my questions. Thank you so much for joining me and for chatting with us. And like I said, again, for anybody going to Burgundy, a tour with Kim is an absolute must. I'll put all the information in the show notes so you can reach out to her.
Thank you, Haley. Great seeing you again.
Yes, you too. Hopefully we'll see each other again in the future.
Definitely. Cheers.
Right. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
See you, Kim. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast, and I really hope you enjoyed this France and French wine mini-series. This vacation that I took out to France was one that I'd been wanting to do forever, and I knew I wanted to share it somehow through my business, and this podcast was just a perfect way to do that. I got to relive all these things. I got to talk to people again, via these Zoom interviews that I met back in France. And so it was a really special thing that I got to do, and I really hope you enjoyed it as well. If you want to see more little mini series where we deep dive into a region or a certain subject, let me know. I'd be happy to do more like this. Of course, it might not always be connected to a trip I take, though. Maybe it'll give me a good reason to go somewhere else. Now, if you're taking a trip to Burgundy, you know I gotta highlight a tour with Kim. She is absolutely amazing. We booked through Airbnb, but you have the benefit of booking directly with Kim. So you can contact her at kim@journeysandwine.com. It's a better deal. You'll get way more interaction and customization that way. So again, contact Kim directly if you're heading to Burgundy, you need a tour. It's kim@journeysandwine.com. Or go to the link in the show notes. I will have her direct link right there. If you loved this episode as much as I did, you know the routine. Please rate it and leave a review. It's so helpful for me, and share it with another wine lover in your life. In next week's episode, we'll be moving on from French wine right into the holidays. I'll be taking you through my 2024 wine gift guide. This is one of the most asked for guides every year, and I've added lots of new things this year, and I think you're going to love it. Thanks again for listening, and if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. And if you're interested in exploring new wines and joining an incredible community of wine lovers, be sure to sign up for my virtual tasting club, The Cork Crew. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and having fun, I don't know why you're not in the Cork Crew. You are like literally the perfect person for this virtual tasting club. You won't just have to listen to me. We'll get to chat and talk and drink wine. So check it out. You can come try it out for free. Just go to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your free class pass. You choose which upcoming tasting you go to and come try it out. Cheers.